Kia ora, it's Cassie, a.k.a. Nova, and I am here today with my reading wrap-up for January and February. We're not quite at the end of the month yet, but I'm not reading a print book at the moment. I'm not going to start one. There's only one more day to go after today, so let's get into it. It was a very light few reading months. I put this down to the fact that I have not been very mentally well, and so distraction was the name of the game, and it's much easier to distract myself listening to an audiobook and playing mindless games on my phone than it is in a print book, because sometimes I just can't let myself go enough to really get stuck into it. That said, I managed to read 3 books in January and 2 and a bit books in February. Let's get into it. First up, I read Follow Me to Ground. This is by Sue Rainsford, and I've listened to audiobook before. It is so beautifully written. Like, the language is lush, and I remember listening to it thinking, I want to write like this. And so I got the print book so I could go through it a bit slower, and I find my brain processes things differently when I'm reading print versus when I'm listening to an audiobook. So I can clock that things sound great on an audiobook, but I can't necessarily unpack how it's doing, how the author's doing that. So I got this. It's a weird, twisted story. Lots of trigger warnings. I'm sure you can look them up online if you are interested. It's very different to any other book I think I've read. And basically, there's a woman, girl, nebulous, who come from the ground, and her father, who fix people, but they bury them in the ground, or they go inside them and pull out the bits that are wrong or bad, and everyone knows about it. Initially, you kind of think it's set in some fantasy world, but it's actually quite modern. And then there's all this twisty, dark stuff, which I love, the twisty, dark stuff. So, but it's definitely not going to be for everybody. Anyway, I did enjoy it again, still beautiful, and I feel like I learned quite a lot about how to, about word choices, and it made me think a lot about, because the book I'm writing is kind of dark and twisty too, so I'm always looking. This is one of the ones I was reading for kind of research or craft learning kind of stuff. So I feel like that was good. Also, like nebulous characters who may be lying or may not be lying, and a main character who's not necessarily a good person. So it was a good read, and I'm glad I did it in print as well. The second book I read in January was Your Blood, My Bones, and this will be my favourite book of the month. It's, they say, a seductively twisted romance about loyalty, fate, and the lengths we go to hide the darkest parts of ourselves and the people who love those parts most of all. It's by Kelly Andrew, and I hadn't read any of her books before, I don't think. So I love the cover with the vines. Again, feeds into my naturey body horror book that I'm working on. So that was part of why I wanted to read it. I loved how it just jumped straight into, like it says on the back, the setup. She returns to her childhood home to burn it down, and finds him chained up in the basement. He's semi-immortal, and he wants to kill her. So immediately you're kind of thrown right into things, and she has a good way of blending in, like, the backstory. There's some perspectives from the past as well, where the story slowly unfolds, and some misleads where you think things are one way but they're not, and that's really nicely done. And I liked the way she did her characters as well, because they're in opposition but they're not at the same time, and I think that was really nicely done. So I really enjoyed that book. Thirdly, More Plants. This is Horrid, by Katrina Leno, and I enjoyed this one too. This cover is beautiful. This is an Owl Crate version, I believe, that I had on my shelf for ages and really needed to write it. So she's, again, another character who's not necessarily the nicest person, and more family secrets, more darkness. If you can hear noises in the background, Harlow is munching on a beef hoof. It's one of her favourite things to do, and she's dog's gonna dog, right? Yeah. Anyway, it's very good. I really enjoyed it, although I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it at the ending. At this point, it's a month later, and I can't even remember what it was. I just remember that for some reason, this was not my favorite book. Your Blood, My Bones was. That was, I think the writing was more evocative in that one than in this one, but I still really enjoyed this one. Yeah, family secrets, they do it for me, right? And then we moved on to February. So those are the 3 books I read in January. And I was like, I'm going to do better in February, but I did not. But I did read Burn Our Bodies Down, which is by Rory Power. I read Wilder Girls in December, and that was an earlier book. This is, I think she's definitely up to a game in this one, and I really enjoyed it. It was really good. Basically, she's been with her mother. They're not really doing the best. She's pissed off. She finds out something about her mother and decides to go, that she has a grandmother who's alive, and then she goes to find her and discovers very quickly she ends up at the heading towards the farmhouse with these pet kids she meets in town, and there's a fire and a girl who looks just like her dead, or dying, and then is dead. And so it's the whole, what the fuck is going on here? She definitely trends a little bit more towards sci-fi than fantasy with her horror, and I love that personally. Doesn't go quite so well with what I'm reading, but there's lots of elements with secrets and lies and the ways that what we share and what we don't share, which kind of feed into the things I'm working on at the moment. So I really enjoyed this. It was good. Very good. Didn't take me long to finish that one. I went on to some nonfiction then. I decided to pick up Your Head is a Houseboat by Campbell, what's his surname, Walker, a.k.a. Struthless here on YouTube. And Struthless is one of my favourite YouTubers. He always has great content, and it's been so helpful to me in the past. And now he lives in New Zealand now, which is really cool. Yeah, so this is a really cool book. He does all these cool illustrations, and if you're more of a visual kind of person, it's probably really, really excellent. But it had some really good stuff in it that was helpful for me, even though I'm quite, like, I know a lot. I think it's always good to have reminders, and sometimes reminders in a slightly different format than you're used to, i.e. one with drawings in it, which is really cool. And it just feels like you're listening to a friend because I've watched so many of his videos. So you can kind of imagine him saying this stuff as you're reading it. So that was really cool, and I'm glad I read that. His new book, I think, is called Doom and Bloom, comes out later this year. I'm looking forward to picking that one up too. And the last book that I looked at in February was Horns by Joe Hill, and I picked this up ages ago at it was ex-library book. I saw the trailer for the movie and I was really interested by it, and I never got around to watching it. And I thought, I'll read the book, because sometimes that's easier, even though it takes me longer. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I got some way through it and then noped out. It was it's not terrible writing, but I don't know, lots of stereotypical kind of descriptions for different people, and I think I was bothered with the way women were described in particular, and I just thought, I'm not really that into it, and I don't have to finish reading it. And then that kind of inspired me to go through all my other secondhand, like Withdrawn or Book Fair, like car boot sale books that I'd picked up, and do the video I did a few weeks ago on just like trying them all out and seeing which ones are staying and which ones are going. So thanks, Joe. You helped me to cull my my bookshelf, and I know that some people really enjoy this, and it's not for me, and that's okay. So yeah, those are the 6. Whoa! It's okay, Harlow. It's okay. The books are fine. Those are the books that I looked at in February and January, and I'm hoping that I will do better in March, because March is New Zealand Book Month, and even though we don't do big celebrations for it anymore, I thought it would be a good opportunity to. I've got a stack of New Zealand books over here, and I have more than that, but most of them I've read because I'm quite good at reading locally. So I'm looking forward to getting into them and getting through a few of them. They've been sitting on my shelf for quite some time. So hopefully March will be a better reading month. I think towards the end of the month I've got who knows how many manuscripts kind of heading my way. I'm judging an award for New Zealand Society of Authors. I've done it for the last few years, and we have to go through a lot of books to they're usually like they're not finished books. They're oh my god, I cannot word today. Submissions basically because they go to a publisher. When we've selected the top 3 or 3 to 5, we collaborate with a publisher to pick the winner, who they typically go on to publish. So that'll be fun, but that is a lot of reading. So it's going to be interesting how I can juggle all the things. Although those are New Zealand books too, so I guess they count. They're just not from my print TBR. I did want to mention a couple of other books this month because I had some books arrive in the mail. I'm doing a book fair in Hamilton in April, and I finally got around to ordering some print copies of my books. This is Courting Envy, which I love. It's such a fun book to write. Actually, these are all fun books to write. How the Marquis Found His Meow, which is, I love this cover. It's so cool. My friend Dee did all the covers for the Monsters Ball. And then finally, Dee did this cover too, actually, The Archer Queen, which is also, it's like a fantasy heist novel with a reverse harem. So super fun. And I'm so stoked to have these 3 going to go on my shelf because I actually accidentally kind of sold my own copies to someone last year. Finally got around to having some more and getting them back on my shelf. So that was exciting. Anyway, I'm going to sign off because I've got to go and drop something off at school for a kid. Anyway, those are my books for the first 2 months of the year. Wish me luck. And we'll see how I get on in March. Until next time, catch you later.